Hey, everybody. It is Tuesday, May 27th, here on the Mo News Podcast. I'm Moshe Manunu.
And I am Jill Wagner. This is the place where we bring you just the facts.
And we read all the news and read between the lines so you don't have to. I hope you all had a wonderful holiday weekend. Jill, how was yours?
It was great. And I know that you had asked me if I planned on traveling, and I had said, oh, yeah, 1 mile max from my house. But I actually went to the city a bunch over the weekend. I was in Brooklyn and in your neck of the woods on the Upper East Side.
You don't call, you don't text.
I thought you weren't going to be there. I thought you were going away.
You should. It's worth checking. You could check. Hey, Moshe, I don't often make it into the city, even to tape this podcast. But when I do, I'm curious, where are you? Just saying. I will note, though, on Saturday, we were in New Jersey. On Sunday, we were in Westchester County celebrating my wife's grandmother's 90th birthday. Elaine Renner is a listener of this podcast. So, Elaine, it was wonderful to celebrate. She likes to say she's entering her 91st year. She takes pride in the fact that she's entered year 91 here now that she's turned 90. But it was awesome. It was great to see the whole family together, and we scored pretty well on the How Well Do We Know Elaine quiz, which was part of the festivities for the birthday
I love
party.
that. So here's the thing. The reason that I did not reach out to you is because I know you. I follow you. I saw where you guys were. I
Anyway,
knew you weren't there.
Well, we're not going to triangulate exactly when you were in the city and if I was available, but I'm a little hurt. There's a little part of me that is hurt here that you didn't send me the text.
Moshe, next time you will get the text and you're going to be like, oh God, I should have never told Jill to reach out every time she comes to the Upper East Side.
Jill, it's nap time. What are you thinking?
Jill, it's 9 a.m. What do you want?
No, 9 a.m. That's great. That's great. By it's the noon to 3 p.m. trouble period. That's trouble around nap time. But I hope everyone had a wonderful weekend. Jill, we posted over on the premium Instagram feed outtakes from the podcast. So we're recording sometimes before we get started. We record as we're taping. Sometimes we cut things out for your sake, for efficiency's sake. By you, I mean the listener, but also Jill. Jill likes to keep these, podcasts tighter than I like to. And we were, what was it? It was Thursday, and I like to dig around for chit chat topics for the top of the podcast. And so I'm digging around. We were already recording, and we put this clip up over on Instagram. And Jill's Moshe, we have Memorial Day to talk about. We're good. And I was like, what the F is Carb Day? I think was one element of the outtake, right?
Yes.
And I was excited. I didn't even get to really research it because I was like, oh, Carb Day, there's a day devoted to eating carbs. But then the Indianapolis people were like, Moshe, Carb Day is the last day for practice for the Indy 500. Not carbohydrate, but carburetor.
Big difference.
Big difference.
So I had assumed it was carbs, like the food carbs, because that's where my brain goes. And for the record, in my defense, I had just put the finishing touches on the podcast, and it had so much news.
Yeah.
So much so that Memorial Day, which was supposed to be a story in the speed read, I bumped up to be the chit chat at the top. So when Moshe, when the pod was so full, was like, what else do we have for the top? I was like, Moshe, just let's do this.
We have topics. I'm just like, what the F? And you're just like, can we effing get started? And people are like, by the way, Jill, there are a bunch of people that were like, oh my God, you guys are really dropping F-bombs. We need that more on the podcast. We try to keep it clean for all of you in the edited version of the podcast. But rest assured, it's yet another reason for those of you who are premium members to sign up for Mo News Premium is we give you the outtakes over there on the premium Instagram feed. mo.news/premium if you're not already a member.
And with that, let's get to some headlines here. The latest on the U.S. trade war and Trump's 50% tariff threat on Europe on Friday. So where things stand after the long weekend?
Yeah, not surprisingly, that fluctuated throughout the weekend. Plus, we'll have details on the state of U.S. trade with the EU, their largest trade partner, and what we're buying from China these days.
President Trump calls Russian President Vladimir Putin, quote, absolutely crazy. We'll tell you why.
And why others are saying, what took you so long, President Trump?
Senate Republicans threaten to change a lot of Trump's big, beautiful bill. So what are the major sticking points? Overseas, an American citizen was arrested for a plot to firebomb a U.S. Embassy office in Tel Aviv. What he posted on Facebook in the hours before he was arrested. Back here in the U.S., Texas is set to enact the strictest social media ban for kids in the country. what the experts are saying. Was it a shove? Was it a slap? We'll break down that viral video that appears to show the French First Lady hitting her husband. And it is not the first time that the couple has drawn scrutiny.
In the face, Jill, on camera. If you haven't seen it yet, go check it out on the Mo News Instagram account as you listen to our breakdown of the story.
It's pretty amazing, actually.
Also, I'll give it to Emmanuel Macron. Like, he quickly reacts, realizing that, like, there's a live feed happening of what just took place, and then just gives, like, a friendly wave with a smile after what was, despite what he says, definitely a fight.
And are you brave enough to ask ChatGPT if you're hot or not? How some people are using artificial intelligence to plan their summer glow up.
Jill, what's remarkable about this is, like, you can go back to the origins of Facebook, like back in Mark Zuckerberg's dorm room at Harvard. And, like, the origins of Facebook was also related to, if people recall, elder millennials, Gen Xers at that point, there's a website called hotornot.com. So this is like, we're in like the third decade of the internet and hot or not.
We just keep running out of ideas.
Like,
basically what's happening.
There's one thing we ask the internet to do, which is like, am I hot? Am I not? And now we're asking AI to do it. Jesus.
It's clearly our primal instincts. And Moshe has On This Day in History.
Oh, so this is fun. As you await On This Day in History, I'll tell you about the handful of non-English songs that went to #1 on the Billboard charts. One of them did it on this day in history. Jill, anything top of mind for you? Non-English majority songs, #1 on the Billboard charts. So, like, took the country by storm.
Non-English.
The majority of the song hit #1 on the U.S. Billboard charts, and there's only been a handful of examples of a non-English majority song.
Oh, and you know what? I was thinking English like British.
No,
but
English,
you just
like,
mean not English language.
Just like the English language. Like,
I was like, aren't most
the language we speak? Yes, no, like 99% of the songs that go to #1 on the Billboard chart.
Was it something with Bad Bunny?
I don't know. We're gonna find out on this day in history.
I feel like that would have been too recent to make On This Day in History.
I mean, I'm surprised.
We shall see.
Well, yeah. But this is relatively recent. This is from the teens, the 20 teens.
I was going to say which ones.
Not like the teens, not like
like the
not
jazz
like talking
age.
about this jazz age.
Okay, now to the latest on the U.S. trade war. On Friday, President Trump threatened 50% tariffs on the country's biggest trading partner, the European Union. Frustrated by what he saw as a lack of progress in talks, the president threatened the 27-country alliance with those massive tariffs. He said they would be going into effect at the end of this week. But about 48 hours later, a change. President Trump saying on Sunday that the U.S. will hold off on implementing those additional tariffs on the European Union until July 9th. In a post on Truth Social, Trump said he received a call this weekend from the European Commission President Ursula von der Leyen, requesting an extension while trade talks continue. Trump said that it was, quote, my privilege to do so. In a statement on X, von der Leyen saying the EU was, quote, ready to advance talks swiftly and decisively, adding that to reach a good deal, quote, we would need the time until July 9th. Trump's threat to slap the EU with those 50% tariffs surprised European officials who thought trade talks were making progress. In fact, Treasury Secretary Scott Bessent had just met with his European counterparts on Friday in Canada as part of the G7 meetings and had given no indication that new tariffs were coming. Then Trump posted on social media Friday that talks were, quote, going nowhere and complained about the EU's value added or VAT taxes and their fines and regulations on U.S. companies. So interesting that everyone else thought things were going smoothly, and Trump was like, no.
We're making good progress. Trump's like, we got to speed this up. So who knows what was going on behind the scenes. We'll explain the VAT situation in just a second here. But just a quick recap, because there's been a lot of tariff movement, as we've been telling you on this podcast. Earlier in the spring, Trump imposed 20% tariffs on the EU. That was part of his Liberation Day tariffs, before slashing the rate back down to 10% for 90 days, as he did most of the world. But then on Friday, he threatened the 50% tariffs. Now that's held off until July as talks continue here. So if you're getting a sense of whiplash, join the club. And that's really how most of the market now feels about it, is they're like, this is a negotiating tactic. I explained to folks over on the premium account. That's where I answer your questions every weekend and throughout the week as well. People are saying, like, what's the deal with them? I'm like, listen, there are two options here. Trump doesn't follow through with the 50% tariffs, or he imposes them and then brings them back within a week or two, citing progress. So the first answer turned out to be the right one, where he never even went forward with them. There was this phone call, but ultimately here, this is how he tries to get concessions. And as far as he's concerned, we have a major trade deficit with the European Union. They're our largest trading partner. We do more trade with Europe when you consider that 27 country alliance of the EU than we do with China, than we do with Canada. And last year, the U.S. imported $600 billion in goods from the EU, but they only bought $370 billion of our goods. Now, when you add in services, which is something Trump doesn't like to do, but ultimately is part of trade, right? We're mainly services oriented here in the U.S., so that includes finance, consulting, banking, U.S. tourism. The deficit shrinks, but there still is a deficit. But he is very focused on the goods deficit, as in Europe buying our stuff, buying more of our stuff as much as we buy of their stuff. And Europe has always had a much more protectionist angle than the US. They like to protect their individual country industries. I mean, they've literally passed laws, right? Champagne can only come from the Champagne province of France. And then you have cheeses from Italy and all those variety of things. They're very defensive of their own culture and their own industries. One of the things we buy the most from Europe is pharmaceuticals. It's the single largest EU produced product to the US. Think about it like this. Europe's the home to pharma giants like Bayer, Sanofi. A number of American pharma companies even have factories in Ireland where taxes are low and then ship them over here. Now, as far as the Europeans are concerned, and what we're hoping they'll buy more of, they buy lots of our military and defense products. They also buy a lot of our oil and gas. And the hope is to continue to get them away from Russian oil and Russian gas in particular and have them import more of our stuff. The problem is we are at max capacity right now in the US, even with Trump's drill, baby drill. And ultimately, we don't have much more to sell them right now. So as far as implementing this will be difficult. A key thing here, Jill, for Trump, and is potentially here a key to the deal, he wants Europe to impose tariffs on China. He wants them to buy less on Chinese products and make it more challenging for China to sell stuff to Europe. And that's part of the deal here. Remember, the UK is no longer part of the European Union. We've cut a separate framework of a deal with them. And key to that deal was UK saying, okay, we'll do some tariffs on China to make President Trump happy here.
Right. So the EU has said it would not negotiate over certain Trump demands like those value-added taxes or VAT. It's a type of consumption tax applied in Europe at each stage of the supply chain from production to the final sale. It is different than sales taxes here in the States because sales taxes are only applied at the final point of sale to consumers. The typical VAT is 20% versus the U.S. sales tax, which is about 6%. The general idea is that because a VAT makes goods more expensive in Europe, it creates an incentive for European and U.S. manufacturers alike to sell their goods in the United States instead.
So that's part of the issue here. One of the reasons we have the trade deficit is they have these rules, these taxes that make it difficult to sell goods in Europe, and is one of the reasons we buy way more of their stuff than they buy of our stuff.
Some European ministers have made it clear that they would not accept a deal that keeps Trump's 10% baseline tariff in place, a concession the UK made in a pact that they had signed earlier this month. European leaders have offered to reduce tariffs on industrial goods to zero if the U.S. does the same, and to increase purchases of U.S. energy. In return, they hope to reduce tariffs that Trump has applied to all European products, as well as specific tariffs on things like cars and pharmaceuticals.
Yeah, a big thing for Trump, and they'll often cite this, is that, you see a lot of European cars here in the US, but you don't see many American cars being driven around Europe. And there's a variety of reasons for that, including some of these trade policies by Europe, but also the fact that, we're building a bunch of huge SUVs, which don't necessarily work well in Europe, fit in Europe, and gas prices in Europe are much higher here in the US, and we make much less gas efficient cars for the most part. Some of the only American cars you might see in Europe are very small cars, but we're building fewer and fewer of those these days. So we'll see what they come to in a deal here. This is a big deal, though, because ultimately, as we've told you, the US's biggest trading partner is the EU. Jill, a lot of deadlines that have been extended now into that first week of July. So if you were hoping to just chill out and not look for any news headlines around July 4th, sorry, wah wah. All the trade deadlines come due that week.
Right. There's an expression on Wall Street, sell in May and go away. The idea being that May to October are historically a weaker stock market and pretty quiet as compared to just say November to April. I don't know if that's going to happen this year.
Though, you know what's so interesting, though, Jill? I was talking to one person in finance this weekend, and he's like, the market doesn't make any sense right now. Like, the market is above where we were when Liberation Day happened, and we still have 30% tariffs on China. In many cases, some of those products are more than 50% tariffs. We have a 10% global tariff going on right now. Surprises coming out every single week here, and yet the market sort of just is like, okay, we're used to this now. And so it's very interesting to kind of see where stocks are right now, given all that's unfolding. And the bet, there was not even like a freak out over the EU thing, because they assumed, rightfully, that within hours or days, or in some cases weeks, it would be pulled back. And ultimately, that's what happened about 48 hours later.
And sticking with trade here, the New York Times is reporting that officials in some countries are looking to create goodwill with President Trump by cutting deals with his private business, aka the Trump Organization, which is currently run by his sons, Eric and Don Jr. The latest example, Vietnam approved a Trump Organization plan to develop a $1.5 billion golf complex outside Hanoi and a skyscraper in Ho Chi Minh City. They've approved this development as they face intense pressure to strike a trade deal to heat off Trump's threat of 30% tariffs on Vietnam's exports.
Yeah, this is a very interesting story. We were talking about it over on the premium Instagram account over the weekend. Vietnam has fast-tracked this, ignoring many of their own laws, granting very generous concessions to the Trump Organization, allowing the project to break ground without completing at least half a dozen legally required steps. Just to give you a sense, the process for approvals to build in Vietnam, typically a 2 to 4 year process. They were able to get this done in 3 months. For the Trump Organization to break ground on this golf complex. The president's son, Eric Trump, was there in the last couple of weeks at the groundbreaking event. But you do have the Trump Organization saying, no, this is totally us. This has nothing to do with the president.
Right. The White House is pushing back, saying, quote, all of the president's trade discussions are totally unrelated to the Trump Organization. They claim there are no ethical issues with the president's family developing about 20 Trump-branded properties around the world, because it is the president's sons who technically run the businesses. But President Trump's financial disclosure report shows that he is still personally benefiting from these businesses.
Yeah, it's interesting. Reporters have asked about this sort of thing, including that big crypto dinner Trump had last week with, the largest buyers of his meme coin seeking, in some cases, they actually tell reporters, like, I'm looking to get access to the president so I can lobby him on various things. A lot of murkiness between his business and his role as president, ethical issues here. The White House is like, it's offensive you would even ask that or accuse the president of doing it. But it does come as you've had Republicans and Trump go after Biden for years for what Hunter Biden was doing, right? Hunter Biden sitting on the board of a Ukrainian energy company. Hunter Biden trying to do business arrangements with China, getting his dad on the phone. I mean, this was years and millions of dollars of investigations with the Republicans saying, how could he? And by the way, much of that time was Biden wasn't even in the White House at that time. He was a former vice president. And nonetheless, they said, you're profiting off of this. And so is your son. It's one of the reasons why Biden gave his son Hunter a pardon so they didn't have to deal with potential legal issues. So, amid all those allegations here, you have a bunch of countries. We mentioned the Vietnam example here, but you get Gulf countries like Qatar doing multi-billion-dollar deals with the Trump Organization. Of course, they also have given us the plane as of last week to be the new Air Force One. Other deals, there was a $2 billion deal for Jared Kushner, the son-in-law who's married to Ivanka. He served a senior role in the first term. He did a deal with the Gulf for $2 billion where he's investing their money for them. If you remember, during the first term, Trump owned a hotel in D.C., one of the more expensive hotels in D.C., and foreign diplomats would make a point of staying at the Trump hotel and then going to the White House and telling the president how much they liked his hotel as they were negotiating various deals here with the White House. So there's a lot of you asking about legal issues here. You can imagine there will be various lawsuits, but things are murky here. And some of that is not explicitly in the law, but certainly ethically speaking is unwise. And you hear this from even, former Republican officials who served in various capacities, ethical capacities for previous Republican White Houses. And so, we'll see what comes of all of that. And there are some Republicans on Capitol Hill who are like, we don't like this. Like, We don't like this stuff. Like, Trump, please stick to all the good stuff that we think that you're doing when it comes to the border and a variety of things. But like this interweaving and interconnectedness between the family business and what he's doing as president, especially in light of tariffs and some of these international negotiations, is making, well, Democrats, I mean, not surprisingly, but there are Republicans who are like, it would make us feel better if this stuff wasn't going on.
Staying with international politics, this weekend, President Trump sharply criticized Russian President Vladimir Putin, calling him, quote, absolutely crazy, following Russia's most intense aerial assault on Ukraine to date. The weekend's attack involved over 300 drones and missiles. They were mostly aimed at civilian targets, from residential areas in Kyiv to university dormitories. At least 12 people were killed. There were dozens of injuries across Ukraine. In a post on Truth Social, Trump said that he has, quote, always had a very good relationship with Putin, but condemned him for needlessly killing a lot of people. And he warned that Putin wants, quote, all of Ukraine. And then he made these remarks about the situation to reporters Sunday before boarding Air Force One.
I'll give you an update. I'm not happy with what Putin's doing. He's killing a lot of people, and I don't know what the hell happened to Putin. I've known him a long time, always gotten along with him. But he's sending rockets into cities and killing people, and I don't like it at all.
New Putin, Moshe, same as the old Putin. That's what some people are saying here. The Kremlin responding to Trump's remarks by attributing them to, quote, emotional overload, with spokesperson Dmitry Peskov asserting that Putin's actions are in line with Russia's national security interests. I can't imagine saying that Trump is dealing with emotional overload. I can't see that going over well.
Yeah, I mean, I think I've heard lots of Democrats say that, but the fact that Russia is saying that
drama
means,
queen.
Yeah, like, and by the way, after these remarks, Jill, Putin went forward with one of his most aggressive attacks on Ukraine to date. Several hundred more drones Sunday night into Monday, killing a number of civilians there. But you do have a lot of folks saying, hey, Trump, where have you been here? This has been the Putin that we've known for a very long time. Vladimir Putin's been in charge since 2000. He really started to get aggressive around 07, 08 with his invasions of various neighboring countries. And Trump is saying here, well, this is not the Putin that I know. This guy's gone crazy. With others saying, no, this has always been Putin. Putin's always been this way. He very much wants to restore the glory of the Soviet Union and wants to take back all these territories that became independent with the fall of the Soviet Union back in the early 90s. So he wants Latvia back. He wants Lithuania back. He wants Estonia back, Ukraine back, etc. And he wants influence over Europe. He wants the Russians to be seen as a global power and not this diminishing power with diminishing influence that we've seen over the course of the past few decades. Now, there's certain trend lines here that are irreversible, but nonetheless, Putin very much wants to do what he thinks he needs to do, and that has included a very deadly war in Ukraine, the first major invasion on the European continent since World War II. And so we're going to watch this relationship and how it unfolds here between Trump and Putin. There has been this dance where, Trump has tried to give Putin everything that he wants. That hasn't been enough for Putin. They have these phone calls. Trump has said, the only person who can get this done is me, myself, and I. I will get on the phone with Putin. I will make it happen. But then you heard him over the weekend. You heard some of that just now that Jill played. Clearly Trump is like, who is this guy? Like, what happened to this guy? And I guess he has these sort of like rose-colored glasses for Vladimir Putin, even though if you ask George W. Bush, Barack Obama, Joe Biden, any major U.S. official, Condoleezza Rice, anyone who has dealt with Vladimir Putin over the course of the last 25 years, they all tell you the same thing. You can't trust him. You can't trust him. He has his eyes set on this new Russian empire. And, you did have that social media post, Jill, a few weeks ago where Trump wrote, Vladimir, stop, in all caps, like, said in the voice of like Piper, no, like Vladimir, stop.
Don't make me turn this car around.
Don't make me turn this car around. And so we're going to see how this goes down here. Very much Trump wants to be the guy who makes peace here between Russia and Ukraine. And after that blow up that Trump had with Zelensky, Zelensky's very much like trying to do everything Trump tells him to do, trying to play ball here. And by doing that, I think he's hoping that he exposes that it's Vladimir Putin who's a big problem here.
Time for the speed read from ABC News. Republicans in the Senate are indicating that they are planning to take a closer look and make changes to that massive tax and spending bill that passed the House last week. Wisconsin's Republican Senator Ron Johnson expressed significant concerns over the weekend about President Trump's, quote, big, beautiful bill, suggesting that there's enough resistance among Senate Republicans to halt the bill unless significant changes are made. Johnson criticized the bill for potentially increasing the national debt between $3 and $5 trillion and said he believes there are a number of senators who share his view.
I think we have enough to stop the process until the president gets serious about spending reduction and reducing the deficit.
Republicans are using a budgeting tactic called reconciliation to get the package through both chambers and to Trump's desk. Reconciliation basically means that only a simple majority would need to vote yes for that bill to pass. Instead of the usual 60 votes, it would require only 50, with the vice president, J.D. Vance, breaking any ties. So that means that Republicans could only lose 3 Republican votes. Even so, any changes in the Senate would require that the bill go back to the House, where it was passed by only 1 vote among a divided Republican conference last week. House Speaker Mike Johnson is encouraging the Senate to make as few changes as possible to the legislation.
Yeah, not surprising. Johnson was like, listen, I got this out by a hair, and one of my guys slept through the vote. So ultimately,
literally,
you're all right. Like Andrew Garbarino, we're still mocking you week 2. You slept through the vote last week, but they were able to get it through. Now the Senate's like, listen, we're the U.S. Senate. We're much more important than the House. That's always the view of the U.S. Senate. And we're going to deal with this. And even Republicans in the Senate are like, we're willing to challenge the president here and challenge the folks in the House. This is an 1,100-page piece of legislation. They added a lot of changes last second to get this thing through. So they want to scrutinize the details here. And so ultimately, this is legislation we told you about, $4 trillion worth of tax cuts. This is the extension of the tax cuts from 2017, extending them further. They're set to end this year. This will boost spending on the military, boost spending on the border security, eliminate taxes on tips, implement substantial reductions in Medicaid, as well as SNAP, food stamps, as well as Medicare. Now, that is where things get very, very controversial, especially for a number of Republican senators, including Josh Hawley from Missouri and others who are like, yeah, I got a lot of people, Republican voters, who are on Medicaid and Medicare, and that's not good. And so ultimately, they're going to want some changes there. But then you have the U.S. House members who are like, no. The only place to really find cuts in this government is Medicare and Medicaid. So that's going to be super controversial. Then you've got Rand Paul, who sort of marches to the beat of his own drummer. He's a Republican over there in the Senate. And he's like, I don't want to increase the debt ceiling, which is currently at $36 trillion. We're just doing this willy-nilly. By the way, his partner over there in Kentucky, the other senator, Mitch McConnell, has gone totally maverick these days and rogue. So Mitch McConnell will probably have his own ideas and likes to poke the president in the eyes these days because he doesn't like Trump and he don't care anymore. So there are a number of Republicans here that will have various issues and various incentives to change things. And as we know from I'm Just a Bill sitting here on Capitol Hill, if a different version of the bill passes, it goes back to the House. And then Mike Johnson has his work cut out for him because now the Senate's passed a different version. And now he's got to convince his members, and it was already hard enough for him to do it the first time, to now agree to the Senate changes. We'll see what happens, Jill. Deadline on that, also July 4th. That's the internal deadline they've set for themselves. They want to get this done by July 4th for the president to sign. So beyond the tariffs, another thing we'll be watching going into that holiday.
Thanks, guys. I mean, really, can you give us a break, please?
Nope.
From the Daily Beast, a dual American-German citizen was arrested and charged Sunday with attempting to firebomb the U.S. Embassy office in Tel Aviv. The Department of Justice says 28-year-old Joseph Neumeier, who was originally from Colorado, showed up at the U.S. Embassy's branch office in Tel Aviv last week and spat on a guard unprovoked. The guard attempted to detain him, but he escaped, leaving behind a backpack that contained 3 Molotov cocktails. Law enforcement tracked him to his hotel where he was arrested. Israeli authorities deported him to the U.S. on Sunday. He was arrested at New York's JFK airport as he arrived in the country. The DOJ thinks that they have identified a Facebook account belonging to Neumeier, where he announced his intention to attack the embassy office and threatened to kill President Trump and Elon Musk. If convicted, he faces a maximum sentence of 20 years in prison.
Yeah, it appears this guy is very unstable. Jill wasn't really trying to do this secretly. He had very bold Facebook posts, including the following post, Jill. Join me as I burn down the embassy in Tel Aviv. Death to America, death to Americans, and F the West.
He's like the disgruntled American version of the Houthis.
Yes, right. Death to America, death to Jews.
The West,
That's their whole motto.
Kill everyone.
So,
yes.
Right. So yeah, death to America. That's like what they announce in like Iranian rallies every weekend. So he posted this on Facebook. Ahead of that, he also posted on Facebook, "We are killing Trump and Musk now. I will hunt you down and kill you both." So again, this guy Neumeier, I mean, I'm sure he's going to have a defense attorney, but that attorney will have their work cut out for them, given what this guy has been posting on Facebook. But it does come, Jill, as we told you last week, about the killing of the young Jewish couple who worked at the Israeli embassy in Washington. The suspect there had espoused a number of extreme beliefs online as well, chanting also a free Palestine and trying to defend his actions of being able to kill Jews in the name of Gaza and what's been happening there. And so we'll watch the prosecution there in Washington as well as the prosecution of this guy. Jill, just as we're talking about some international terror threats, etc., another major story we were watching over the weekend was this car that plowed into soccer fans in Liverpool. Nearly 1 million fans had showed up to celebrate recent victories. About 50 people injured. But as of late Monday night, UK authorities have a suspect, a 53-year-old white British man from the Liverpool area who drove through all these people, creating dozens of injuries here. They do not believe, though, it is terrorism related, as some of these car or vehicle attacks have been of late. But we'll continue to watch that story as well.
All right, some new laws being considered regarding kids and social media. This from NBC News. Texas is on the verge of enacting one of the most stringent social media regulations in the U.S. with legislation which seeks to prohibit anyone under 18 from creating or maintaining accounts on platforms like TikTok, Instagram, Snapchat, and Facebook. The bill mandates age verification for all users and grants parents the authority to request the deletion of their child's account, requiring platforms to comply within 10 days. The legislation has passed the Texas House with a 116-25 vote, and it is currently under consideration in the Senate.
This would be a big deal, Jill, because as we've been talking about various states and what they're doing here, Texas would only be the second state to ban kids of a certain age from social media. Florida is the first state, but Florida banned kids under 14 from social media. This would be anyone under 18, which is pretty significant here. Now, advocates for this argue that it addresses the digital epidemic affecting youth mental health. There have been a number of studies, we discussed them on this podcast, linking social media use along with increased rates of depression, anxiety, self-harm, a whole variety of things affecting both young men and young women. But you do see a lot of civil liberties groups in the tech industry who say that this infringes on the First Amendment rights of young people, raises significant privacy concerns due to the required age verification process. Social media companies do not want to be involved in this. You have heard from folks at Meta and others who say age verification should be dealt with by the App Store, by Apple and Google, or I should say Alphabet, the parent company of Google. So we'll see what happens with all of this, potential legal fights over this. But I mentioned the Florida law. You've also had Nebraska and Connecticut. They've approved bills that would require parental consent for anyone under 18 to open a social media account. So parental consent laws, you're seeing that in more and more states. Georgia, Tennessee, and Louisiana have all passed laws requiring parental consent for anyone under 16 to open an account here. In Minnesota, lawmakers have debated a number of measures around this issue, including a tax on companies that mine data on the state's residents. They've proposed a mental health warning label for social media platforms. This is going to make it increasingly difficult for a TikTok, for Meta, for Snapchat to navigate all these state laws. And, you know, we've been reporting on this podcast about how they're trying to make social media safer from their vantage point for young people, for teens. But all this whole sort of potpourri of laws that now you're seeing state by state, they're going to get to the point where they're like, okay, you know what? We should just make it 18 and above. Right now it's 13 and above to get on social media. So that's something we should definitely watch for.
I think it also points to the fact that states, like with so many issues, realize that the federal government is simply not going to ever do anything. I mean, they have been debating bills and we've been talking about them for years. And even they have passed some legislation But the impact is so insignificant in many cases. And so, again, states just realizing that they have to take the lead here. Now to the latest on some dramatic video of a world's leader being smacked in the face by his wife. From Time magazine, you might have actually seen the video online already. It's been on our Instagram page. French President Emmanuel Macron's wife, Brigitte Macron, shoving or slapping him in the face as they disembarked from their plane in Hanoi. They were on an official visit to Vietnam. The video was filmed Sunday as the Macrons arrived in Vietnam. They were marking the start of a Southeast Asia tour. It shows the president standing in the doorway of the aircraft. The doors open, cameras are waiting, and that's when you see a pair of hands belonging to a person wearing a red blazer, later identified as his wife Brigitte, reach out and appear to shove him in the face. President Macron is seen turning his head and then quickly realizing the door is open. So he smiled, waved to the press. They later made their way out of the plane. President Macron put his arm out for his wife to take, but she did not as they walked down the plane steps together. And so now there's a lot of speculation about what is going on. Is this couple fighting? The French Presidential Communications Department initially tried to just dismiss the video as AI, but eventually acknowledged it's real. President Macron tried to laugh it off. He called the incident a playful interaction between him and his wife. He claimed they were just joking around. He also cautioned against misinterpretations online, pointing to false claims circulated earlier this month that a crumpled up tissue he picked up on a train trip to Ukraine was a bag of cocaine. What?
So
what
hold
is
on.
that?
So Jill, there was like the separate thing we talked about on Instagram a couple weeks ago, where there was a video of him, Keir Starmer, and another world leader like on a train, and like it wasn't very focused, and so it looked like people like looked at it, they're like, oh my god, is there a bag of cocaine in front of them? And like he grabbed it very quickly in sort of a suspicious way, so people were like, oh my god, he was like hiding the cocaine. They head out. Okay, it was not cocaine. It was a tissue. The point is here, Macron is like, you guys made a big deal out of that. That wasn't cocaine. Now, in this case, this is very different. Like his wife pushed him in the face, like slapped him in the face on camera. This has nothing to do with like, you know, an out of focus video of like something on a table. And like his relationship with his wife have always been a subject of scrutiny. Why? Among other things, Jill, she is 24 years older than him. They met when he was 15 years old and she was 39. He was a high school student, along with her daughter. She was a teacher, 39-year-old teacher. He was 15. She was married at the time with 3 kids. But apparently that's where they first fell in love. She would eventually divorce her first husband, the father of her kids, and marry Emmanuel Macron in 2007. And so, anyway, that is not your typical way you meet your spouse, but that is ultimately here how the Macrons met. So their relationship has always taken on added interest on the part of not only in France, but people around the world. We posted this on Instagram. It blew up. The amount of comments people are posting is pretty incredible. Various observations. And for the most part, I don't think anyone that is buying that they were just joking around. You don't need to know that. You don't need to have the audio to understand, to look at that video and be like, that wasn't a joke. Like, she was clearly very angry at whatever was going on there. And Jill, interestingly, you know, if roles were reversed and it was a man doing that to a woman, you know, it would be, some people are pointing out, they would be taken even that much more seriously. You know, that's
abuse. Yes.
Yeah, that's assault. So anyway, just some background for all y'all there.
I think it's very lame that they first tried to say that it was an AI video.
That's going to be
not cool.
But we know that that's going to be the thing now that all politicians now say with AI getting better and better is that audio that is leaked or video that comes out, everyone's going to be like, it wasn't me, that's AI. And that's going to be a thing. And in this case, there were literally live cameras from, you know, networks around the world rolling on this. And they're like, no. They were like, we were there. Like that's not fake.
And finally, from the Washington Post, the latest website that we're asking if we're hot or not, ChatGPT. So people are uploading their photos to OpenAI's ChatGPT and asking it for assessments of their looks and asking the bot to formulate a, quote, glow-up plan to improve their appearance. Users say the bot has recommended specific products, everything from hair dye to Botox. Some even admit to following those recommendations and spending thousands of dollars for the glow up.
Jill, the Washington Post spoke to a bunch of people who are, using ChatGPT for everything these days. How to decorate their homes, what to buy at the grocery store. And so people are like, how can I be more attractive, ChatGPT? And they're like, well, here are some suggestions for what to do with your skin, your hair, your brows, your lashes, your makeup, your clothes. And I imagine, if I did plastic surgery, what would you recommend I do to my face right now? It's interesting because in some cases, your friends or family might not be open about certain things because they're worried about how you might feel. But ChatGPT don't care.
They don't care.
They don't care. They're like, ChatGPT is probably going to be your most honest friend. You're like, what's going on with you? And you could probably get put a photo of yourself from a couple years ago and then today. It's like, what do you think has changed?
Everything okay?
Is everything okay? You seem really stressed out today, Jill, said ChatGPT. And so ultimately here, it appears that, some people see AI's responses as more impartial here and will give you a technical assessment of your looks and things to do and the glow up plan.
All right, Moshe, I know that you are a big ChatGPT guy. So have you used it?
We haven't. We have not yet. I say we because my wife and I actually discussed. We're like, should we ask Chet? Let's put some photos in. And we were going to, but we were at dinner last night, and so I was joking with you before the podcast. Our daughter's 20 months old and full toddler right now, and there's no free time at sitting at dinner. You're constantly just entertaining her, trying to eat as quickly as possible. Begging the waiters to just whatever's ready, just bring it out right now. So we did not get to that, but I'm game. I'll let this audience know what ChatGPT recommends. I already know I got lines on my forehead, so definitely they'll recommend Botox. We'll see what else they recommend. That AI. Would you do it?
So I'm at an age where I don't. All right, I'm going to do some real talk. Okay. I don't feel attractive anymore, and I really don't. I just I just feel old and unattractive. So I don't think that I would.
Well,
I know it's sad. I'm okay with it. It's fine.
You look great for your age.
I had a good run. I just think it's kind of come to an end.
Okay,
and
folks, we're gonna hit stop on the record here, and we're gonna talk to Jill. And cheer her up right now.
I'm fine. No, I'm really okay.
But also, funny enough, you could probably ask, you're like, ChatGPT, I really need a pep talk. I don't need real talk. I need a pep talk.
I need a hype friend here.
I need a hype friend. Can you be my hype friend right now?
I'm not trying to be a big bummer, and I don't want everyone to feel bad or
Jill looks.
I'm just being honest. I don't
folks,
feel great in terms of It's just I'm at that. I think most women could probably relate. There's an age where you're just I don't know. I don't know if I have it anymore.
Well, ChatGPT says you shouldn't change a thing about yourself, Jill. I just asked.
that you're going to give me a specific prompt to put in. So it's you're great. Don't change anything.
Okay. On this day in history, on this May 27th, we begin in 1647. The first execution of an alleged witch in America took place in Salem, Massachusetts, the beginning of the infamous Salem witch trials. On this day in 1930, the Chrysler Building opened in New York City, becoming the tallest building in the world. And that would end about a 40-year run by the Eiffel Tower. The Eiffel Tower actually had a good run there as the tallest building in the world. Jill, the Eiffel Tower had surpassed the Great Pyramid, which ran a couple thousand years as the tallest building. Then you had the Eiffel Tower run for 40 years, and then you had the Chrysler Building. Now, the Chrysler Building's run would last about 300 days because the Empire State Building opens up a year later, and then we're off to the races of various skyscrapers around the world. So the Chrysler Building, I love it. I think it's beautiful. It's the background of, isn't the Amex logo incorporate the Chrysler Building, right? That cool spire or whatever. And but they only had 300 days to be the tallest building. So
I was feeling bad for the Chrysler Building, but I don't think the Chrysler Building needs to be the tallest building because, as you mentioned, it's such a beautiful, cool building on its own. So it doesn't need that. There are some buildings that need the recognition of being the tallest. That's their thing. But the Chrysler Building is, I think, timeless.
There you go.
That's a pep talk.
That's a
Not
pep
that
talk.
the Chrysler Building
You are the
needed
Chrysler
one.
Building. Now, Chrysler Building, what are you going to say about Jill? Because she's all bummed
How
out
do I
today.
look?
Chrysler Building. How does Jill look? Because she thinks you look fantastic nearly 100 years later. Also, another big opening on this day, the Golden Gate Bridge opened on this day in 1937. The suspension bridge connecting the San Francisco Peninsula and Marin County, one of the most recognized works of U.S. architecture, was the longest suspension bridge in the world. It was then beaten out by the Verrazano Bridge here in New York. Now you got a bunch of them in the world. China's built like more than a dozen of them, longer than that. So Golden Gate and Verrazano now respectively the 20th and 21st longest suspension bridges in the world. We end here with some music history. On this day in 1963, Bob Dylan releases his second album, the Freewheelin' Bob Dylan. It would go on to transform him from a popular local act to a global phenomenon. On that album, among other songs, was Blowin' in the Wind. And Jill, the answer to our clue at the top. On this day in 2017, Despacito by Daddy Yankee and Justin Bieber tops the Hot 100 charts, the Billboard Hot 100, becoming the first number one on the chart sung mostly in Spanish since previous record holder Macarena. So if you look at the Billboard history here, Despacito, Macarena, the one before the Macarena, La Bamba. There's only been a few non-English hits who have topped the charts there, Gangnam Style being another one from recent memory. Jill, I thought you were totally going to do the Macarena because like that's your era. Like I thought you would have been like our era, not your era, our era. But Macarena would have been like I thought you were going to go there when I said non-English.
I was totally thrown off. I was thinking British. I just didn't. Couldn't process the question.
Yeah,
and then once I had to adjust to, okay, he didn't mean British. He meant, just American, non-English speaking.
Yeah.
I was too flustered. I couldn't even, I couldn't process it. But that makes sense. And I guess Bad Bunny was not a horrible
I think Bad Bunny would be a very good guess. In fact, he might have already gotten a number one in the past couple of years, as an example. Now, of course, today's is Despacito's day, but we'll look for any Bad Bunny records and feature him on a future podcast here.
And Despacito, of course, famous for getting stuck in your head. So we apologize, everybody, if this is in your head for the rest of the day.
First of all, literally, look at the selection of songs. Despacito, Macarena, La Bamba, and Gangnam Style. We all have lost months of our lives to these songs. Yes.
So we apologize in advance.
So I apologize in advance for one of these songs being in your head now.
All right. Thank you guys for listening to the Mo News Podcast. If you like what you hear, please share this with your friends. It will help us grow. Follow us, subscribe so you don't miss an episode, and review us in the App Store. We appreciate it.
Thanks, everybody. We'll see you back here tomorrow. Short week. Tomorrow's Wednesday.
Thanks for listening to the Mo News Podcast. Have a fantastic day. I hope you enjoyed.